Before he was chosen, Abraham was just a young man living in a small village filled with the smell of wood smoke and the sound of chisels carving stone, a place where everyone believed lifeless statues on the shelves could somehow bring them peace. Yet in the midst of that heavy tradition, Abraham carried a quiet emptiness inside him, as if his soul didn't quite belong to the world everyone else accepted so easily. Each day helping his father carve idols, he looked into those painted eyes and wondered how something that could not breathe could ever protect a human life. The older he became, the clearer his loneliness grew, much like how many young people today stand in a crowd, yet feel their hearts walking in a different direction. Abraham wasn't rebelling. He simply refused to betray that small but persistent voice inside him, the voice that kept him awake at night, lying on the rooftop under a sky full of stars, wondering if there was a higher being quietly listening. And it was that honesty, that courage to question what everyone else accepted without thinking, that made him different among countless ordinary people. This story reaches far deeper than these first steps, and if you feel a connection to Abraham's search for truth, stay with the channel, subscribe, and continue with us as we explore the hidden messages buried within these lost ancient texts. Abraham did not stand against the idols because he wanted to challenge his village or prove himself right. He did it because deep inside, every time he looked at those lifeless statues placed on high pedestals as if they could hear human prayers, something in his chest tightened until he could barely breathe. He grew up hearing the villagers whisper their wishes, watching trembling hands offer sacrifices just to grasp a fragile bit of hope. Yet the more he witnessed, the heavier his heart felt. How could painted wood and carved stone ever hear the cries of a suffering soul? That loneliness inside him kept growing, the kind of loneliness we feel when everyone around us believes one thing, yet our own heart quietly whispers the opposite. And it was this inner contradiction that pushed Abraham to the edge of his spirit. He did not want to hurt tradition, but he could no longer betray the truth forming inside him, a truth so persistent that a single glance or a single breath was enough to remind him he no longer belonged to the old path. So when Abraham finally stood against the idols, it was not an act of rebellion. It was the moment a human being realized he could not keep living under the shadow of what was empty, and had to step out to search for the light meant for him alone. In Abraham's story, faithfulness was not about following what everyone else had believed for generations. It was about being faithful to himself, faithful to that small, persistent voice buried deep inside his heart. There were nights when he lay silently, listening to the wind brush across the rooftop, trying to convince himself to trust the idols the whole village worshipped. Yet his heart would tremble softly, as if telling him that something greater was waiting beyond the world he knew. This kind of faithfulness was not stubbornness, but the quiet courage of a person who dares to hold on to truth even when the entire world thinks differently. Like many of us, Abraham feared being wrong, feared being alone, feared walking a path that went against tradition. But the more he forced himself to fit in, the larger the emptiness inside him grew. And only when he chose to be honest with himself, to trust a feeling that was real, even if no one else could see it, did the path toward truth finally open. Being faithful to his own heart was the first step that allowed him to draw closer to the one he had been seeking all along. When Abraham encountered Azazel, it happened in a desolate valley far from the noise of the village, a place where the wind scraped against the rocks like a warning. Azazel was no ordinary creature. In ancient writings, he was known as the Fallen One, a spirit cast out from the light, condemned to wander the earth as the embodiment of temptation and inner darkness. His form was twisted, half like a scorched beast, with charred wings, half like a shadow given shape, eyes glowing like dying embers, watching Abraham's every breath. Yet it was not Azazel's appearance that struck the deepest fear. It was his voice. He spoke softly, as if he had known Abraham forever, whispering about loneliness, about the pain of being misunderstood, about the burden of choosing a path no one else dared to walk. In that moment, Abraham realized he was not just facing a fallen spirit, but the living reflection of his own hidden doubts. Azazel did not threaten him. He tried to fold himself into Abraham's heart to make him believe the darkness was his only friend. But Abraham had faced these fears long before this meeting. Those silent nights on the rooftop, staring into the endless sky, had already forced him to confront himself. He understood now that Azazel thrived not in the shadows around him, but in the shadows inside a person's soul. So when Azazel reached out, Abraham stepped back with a calm that came from clarity, not from strength. A human may tremble, but need not surrender. And in that breath of defiance, a quiet light rose within him, proving that even in a barren valley, the truth inside a single heart can push back an ancient darkness. The trial of fire came to Abraham when he built the altar of sacrifice in a deserted valley, a place of cracked earth and winds that sounded like the size of the mountains. It was the place the angel led him to, far from the noise of the village, as if every old attachment had been left behind. When Abraham placed the offering on the altar, the fire did not roar upward, as people might imagine, but flickered slowly, burning in a steady, questioning glow, as though testing whether he was truly ready to let go of his fears, doubts, and the lingering pain he carried inside. In our own culture, fire is both a challenge and a beginning, and standing before that flame, Abraham felt he was caught between the weight of his past and the promise of something new. Each tongue of fire that rose seemed to brush against the hidden corners of his heart, not to punish him, but to cleanse him, to strip away what had grown old and heavy within him. In that lonely valley, with the fire crackling softly and the vast sky towering above, Abraham understood that this trial was not about proving obedience, but about freeing him from the shell he had outgrown. And as the flame grew brighter, he felt his heart grow lighter too, as if he had stepped through an unseen doorway and finally touched the truth he had been seeking all his life. Adam fell because of doubt. Noah obeyed without ever asking why. Moses was mighty, yet trembled under the weight of his people. Only Abraham dared to walk in total darkness, trusting a promise he could not see. He dared to question God, to bargain, even to raise the knife over his only son, not out of blind fear, but because he had freely chosen to believe with a bleeding heart. He was not perfect. He lied out of fear. He stumbled. He despaired. Yet he was brutally honest with himself. guarding that tiny flame of curiosity and courage that dares to stand alone against the whole world. That is why, of all the patriarchs, only Abraham was called by name, like a friend. Abraham. Not through terror, not through habit, but through the absolute freedom of a heart that doubts, aches, and still says yes. Abraham is us, fragile, scarred with questions, yet carrying a small fire inside. As long as we keep asking, keep trusting, keep walking against the tide, to guard what our heart whispers, one day in the deep night, we too will hear our name called. That living faith is why Abraham remains forever the father of faith. Abraham is called the father of faith, not because he was always certain, but because he dared to walk forward in the very moments he was most unsure. His faith was never blind belief. It was the journey of an ordinary human being, filled with worries and questions, yet still choosing to move ahead, even when the path before him was as unclear as morning fog. When God told him to leave his homeland, he had no idea where he was going or what awaited him, but his heart whispered that if he did not take that step, he would forever remain in a life that was not meant for him. We often say the path we choose for ourselves is the hardest one, but it is also one that leads us to where we truly belong. And Abraham's story is exactly that. He grew tired, he felt fear, but he never let fear decide his direction. He trusted the voice inside his soul, even before trusting what his eyes could see. And that courage made him a symbol of faith for thousands of years. Abraham's faith was not the absence of doubt, but the ability to stand firm in the middle of doubt. And for this reason, he became the father of faith, the father of all who dare to believe even when their hearts are still trembling. The hidden theological message in Abraham's story does not lie in the overwhelming visions or the heavens opening in blinding light, but in a way the text reveals that darkness and light coexist within the human heart itself. When Abraham was lifted into the heavens and shown the long river of human history unfolding before him, he realized that good and evil were not two separate forces battling outside of us, but threads woven into every small choice a person makes. We often think life is controlled by destiny or the power of unseen beings. But the text teaches the opposite, that every thought, every step, every moment we rise after falling shapes the direction of the entire world. We often say that a person's heart decides their fortune, and Abraham saw this truth in every image displayed before him. He saw how easily people can lose themselves when fear takes over, yet he also saw how one gentle act, one quiet spark of kindness, could light up an entire life. What moved him the most was not humanity's failures, but their resilience, their stubborn determination to stand back up, even when hope seemed thin. This is the hidden message the text wants to leave us with, that heaven does not seek perfect people, but people who refuse to give up, people who dare to look into their own shadows without running away, people who protect a single flicker of light, even when everything around them feels dark. For Abraham, this was the moment he understood that faith is not seeing the light, but choosing to become the light in the darkest places, and that is the message meant for each of us today. The value of doubt in Abraham's story lies in the fact that it does not destroy faith. It is the very soil from which faith is born. Abraham was not always strong. He too felt lost, unsure, wondering whether he was walking the wrong path. Yet those nights filled with doubt were exactly what helped him understand what his heart truly sought. We often fear doubt, thinking it means weakness. But Abraham shows that doubt is when the heart is most honest with itself. When we are uncertain, we begin to listen more deeply, look more carefully, and choose with our whole soul. And because he kept walking through his uncertainty, he eventually learned what he genuinely believed in. Doubt is not darkness. It is the bridge that leads us toward clarity. And by daring to cross that bridge, Abraham became a symbol of faith, proving that those who dare to doubt are the ones who can believe with the fullest conviction. Abraham's loneliness did not come from the absence of people, but from the feeling that he was stepping into a realm where only he could hear the whisper of destiny. In the freezing nights of the desert, under a sky dark and deep, like an endless abyss, with winds sliding through the rocks, carrying a cold that pierced the skin, Abraham stood still with a small flame in his hand, sensing clearly that his footsteps were touching a path no human had ever walked before. There were no voices, only a silence so profound that even his breathing echoed like an ancient ritual, as if the universe itself was waiting for him to face his own soul. In the vast sea of sand, each step blended with the murmurs of the earth and the sky. And Abraham understood that anyone entrusted with a great calling must pass through this moment, a moment where only darkness, wind, and one's heartbeat remain as companions. That loneliness, though as cold and long as a desert night, became the forge that shaped him, for it was within that emptiness that he heard most clearly the quiet, guiding voice of the Almighty. And if you wish to walk alongside journeys as profound as Abraham's, stay with the channel and consider subscribing so you won't miss the next chapters of this story. Hope in the darkness that Abraham witnessed wasn't a blazing light tearing through the sky, but a single, quiet thread of brightness, holding on in the middle of chaos, the way a tiny porch light in the countryside stays lit during a storm, soft yet strong enough to guide someone home. As he saw visions of humanity falling into conflict, loss, and heartbreak, Abraham felt the weight of a world collapsing. But within that overwhelming darkness, he noticed something extraordinary, a fragile spark that refused to die. It flickered in acts of kindness, in moments of courage, in the simple way people still reached for each other, even when everything around them was breaking. That small light reminded him that no matter how deep the shadows grow, hope always finds a way to survive. Because wherever there is goodness, there is a path back to life. Americans often say, it only takes one match to push back the dark. And Abraham understood that the real light doesn't come from miracles in the sky, but from the resilience inside the human heart. Standing before visions of devastation, yet still seeing that single glowing thread, he realized hope isn't waiting for the world to change. It's choosing to keep one warm spark inside, the kind that can brighten even the longest night. The real reason God chose Abraham was not because he was stronger, wiser, or more capable than others, but because he carried something far rarer, a heart willing to stay honest, even when honesty was the hardest road to take. While others followed tradition without question, Abraham dared to listen to that quiet voice inside. the one that asked uncomfortable questions and pushed him toward a truth that wasn't easy, wasn't popular, but was real. He didn't walk with certainty. He walked with sincerity. And that made all the difference. Abraham wasn't chosen for his perfection. He was chosen for his courage to keep moving, even when the path ahead made no sense. For his willingness to hold on to a small light in moments when the world felt overwhelmingly dark. In American culture, we often say character is revealed not when life is easy, but when everything feels like it's falling apart. And Abraham lived that truth. God chose him because he didn't run from who he was, because he didn't let fear define his choices, because he believed the truth was worth pursuing, even if he had to walk alone. His story reminds us that faith isn't about knowing the destination. It's about choosing the next step with integrity. And maybe that's the lesson meant for us today. You don't need to be flawless to be chosen for something meaningful. You just need to be brave enough to follow the light inside you, especially when it's faint. If this journey speaks to you, stay with the channel and follow along as we continue uncovering the wisdom hidden in these ancient texts.